Now, if you're planning to convert a pasture to a garden, generally speaking, pasture land most likely doesn't need much preparation for the coming times when commercial fertilizers are not available. You most likely do not remove leaves from your pasture, and the manure from grazing animals put a great deal of organic fertilizer into the ground. If cattle or horses are grazing the pasture, dragging the pasture to break up manure piles and spreading them will help to distribute the manure. This will help to make your soil more consistent. If sheep or goats are grazing, there's no need to drag due to the fact that sheep and goats, they have tiny pellets for manure, and they actually will often use the bathroom, for lack of a better term, while they're walking. So they're actually spreading those pellets for you. Some of the most beautiful pasture land I've seen is pastures where goats were, because of that fact that they're putting a fertilizer on it for you, and they're spreading it very consistently. In order to keep the pasture at a high level of fertility so that the soil is at its best when it's needed most, some benefit can be gained by using urea, which is chemically organic due to the presence of carbon, to fertilize the pasture each fall. Apply about 100 pounds of urea per acre. Since the synthetic fertilizer is only being applied once per year, while the livestock is distributing organic fertilizer several times per year, this will help the necessary microorganisms, keep them active for the breakdown of organic fertilizers. You can also further increase your ability to, if you want to keep your lawn looking nice while you're building it up, but you don't have a lot of money to spend on organic fertilizers, because to keep your lawn fertilized well, you can follow the same similar procedure. You can apply a synthetic fertilizer one time a year, or sometimes even twice a year, and just keep the organic fertilizers coming about once a month. Land that's currently being used as gardens or crop land. Most of the same rules would apply to gardens and cropland that apply to lawns. The main exception being that if you choose to apply compost, it should be applied after harvest and tilled into the soil, along with the remaining parts of the plants that were grown there. Weeds should not be tilled into the soil immediately, but can be put into a compost pile. This is because any weed seeds will be killed by the heat generated as the compost breaks down in the pile. If you're growing a crop that uses high amounts of nitrogen, such as corn, it could become very costly to apply enough nitrogen for a good crop with only organic fertilizers. In this case, you would continue to apply synthetic fertilizers, but supplement them with as much organic fertilizer as your bottom line will allow. Of course, you could use some of the free sources of organic fertilizer mentioned for use in lawns, with two additions. A great deal of fertilizer can be gotten for free by cleaning your barn stalls and tilling the manure into the garden after harvest. This will allow the manure several months during the winter months to break down. Poultry manure in particular contains a fairly high amount of nitrogen as compared to most other organic fertilizers. The second addition will be in the form of blood. If you process your own livestock or game for the table, blood should be pasteurized by heating up to 160 degrees and held at that temperature for several minutes. After it cools down, you could either use it immediately or refrigerate it for later use. Do not apply blood directly to the crop full strength. Instead, mix 1 cup of blood to 1 gallon of water and pour it onto the soil around the plant. Fertilizer analysis is broken down into 3 numbers. The first number representing the percentage of nitrogen in the fertilizer, the second number represents the phosphorus, and the third is potash or potassium. For example, if the fertilizer analysis of 5, 10, 15 would mean that the fertilizer is 5% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 15% potash. The remaining 70% is inert materials in most cases. However, a portion of the remaining amount may contain some micronutrients which are necessary for plant growth, but in far smaller amounts than the three mentioned before. Now, this is especially in organic fertilizers. Organic fertilizers are going to contain a hodgepodge of different micronutrients, and that's another, while typically your synthetic fertilizers don't contain micronutrients, with some exceptions. And if it is an exception, it will be labeled as so on the bag, and those micronutrients are necessary. So that's another reason that organic fertilizers are going to be better. As a rule of thumb, if soil has been treated regularly or often with synthetic fertilizers, it takes 2 to 3 years using organic fertilizers to adjust the soil so that it produces satisfactorily without the use of synthetic fertilizers. During the crossover time, small amounts of synthetic fertilizers can be used to supplement the organic fertilizers without any adverse effects. This time frame can be shortened in many cases to 1 to 1.5 years if compost is applied twice per year, due to the presence of microorganisms in the compost itself. If you plan to grow any of your food after the end of the world as we know it, you could greatly increase your chances of success just by remembering your soil during your preparations. I'm going to wind up this video here. There will likely be more videos dealing with the same subject, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask, any comments, and as always, I'll use those questions and comments to guide me with, if it's a short answer, I'll give it in the comment section. If it's a longer answer, then I'll use that to guide me on the subject of the next video. Thanks for your time.